All right. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for taking the time to engage with some of our content today, leveraging the latest technology to recruit adult learners. For those who are watching this for the first time, we did a great presentation with our friends at RNL, and we received so many questions via email and follow-ups of wanting to view the recording within the Conduit platform itself. So we're taking a quick moment to just go through some of the highlights, give you the great details that you need, and then also give you the experience and the opportunity to really engage with the content as a student would engage with the content on the platform. So this is going to be kind of a quick hits version of the webcast we did with RNL, but to give you an idea of some of the opportunity with engaging with this content for adult learners, and then also the opportunity to kind of soft demo a Conduit platform yourself. My name is Gil Rogers. I'm a Senior Vice President here at Platform Q Education. We are the developer of the Conduit platform, and the work that we do is integrated into RNL's graduate, online, and traditional undergraduate recruitment programs. So if you're interested in kind of incorporating a webcasting, social media streaming, live online chat plan aligned with your traditional outreach and recruitment programs, we would be a part of that we'd be a component of that plan in conjunction with your RNL plans. So that's the highlights, and that's the context to who we are. What we're going to cover today really quickly is an overview of the adult learner landscape, as well as kind of a quick overview of RNL's solutions for adult learner engagement and how they as a company kind of go about utilizing different resources and tools, combination of new online and traditional legacy channels to reach and inform adult learners on behalf of your institution. Then we're going to go take a deep dive into the Conduit approach and how we align what we call omni-channel communication tactics and strategies with strategic enrollment planning to really boost conversion and yield at each phase of the process. And then finally, what we'll cover is a couple of examples of success of institutions who are already doing this to give you an idea of the results that you could expect should you decide to incorporate webcasting and streaming into your overarching plans. So we'll dive into it really quick. If we think about the adult learner landscape, a lot of this is probably not new to many people who might be consuming this content and viewing this presentation, especially if you reviewed it when we presented it live. But one of the things to think about is, we know that generally enrollment is flattening at most institutions. There's going to be pockets of positive growth here and there, but ultimately at the end of the day, we're seeing essentially a 3% enrollment growth projected between 2016 and 2027. So, when we think about our growth, especially on graduate student recruitment, for a while there, you could have been doing nothing and still see some results or some growth because of the population of prospective students continued to increase up 36% between 2000 and 2016. But now again, forecasting that growth of only about 3% between 2016 and 2027, what we're looking at and seeing is really a scenario where it's a zero-sum game, right? Any new enrollments you gain are going to be enrollments that are lost by somebody else. So we're talking about a pretty competitive marketplace when it comes to growing of adult learners and identifying new leads and maximizing conversion. So the institutions that win, right, if we want to use that word, are the ones who are going to adapt the way that prospective students decide and choose to go about researching information. So, when we think about these students, what we're really talking about is a different type of an audience than maybe traditional undergrad or international audiences. Graduate students are typically nameless. It's not as easy to go out and get a quality list at scale of prospective students researching graduate programs like you traditionally can for undergraduate. They're boundless, especially with online programs. Most students will study even if they're studying online at institutions that are within a couple hours drive at most anyway, but that doesn't mean that that's all of the students, right? So, you look at examples like Southern New Hampshire University and others where they have a national profile because of an online presence and online plans. It's a diverse population, but they're also distracted, right? There's a lot of challenges that go into reaching and engaging prospective adult learners. And the way I kind of look at this is there's kind of two main types, right? There's the student that they go online at 3 o'clock in the morning, they're researching schools on a college search site, or they go to your website, they're researching information, they indicate that they're interested, and then they enroll the next intake cycle and they pursue their degree. And that's great. We love those. The challenge is then there's the other end of the spectrum, right, where the students go through that process, but then they wake up the next morning and they have to get their kids on the bus to school. They have to go to work. They have other life events that happen, getting married, moving, whatever, right? And so the challenge with those students is they enroll eventually, but how do you continuously engage them so they enroll with you at that process and earlier if you can, right? So we want to help students kind of get through that process as quickly as possible. So when we think about the way our friends at RNL go about doing it, there's a variety of different ways that they support when it comes to graduate and online student search and outreach, right? Things like market insights, understanding what type of programs you should be offering, consulting and planning, helping you to understand what you should be forecasting. The challenge is, if we think about that up 3% growth from 2016 to 2026, the challenge there is most presidents want to see 6, 10, 15% growth, right? So the challenge that we have is how do we address those mismatches between the desire to grow and the reality of the market? Things like student success, post-enrollment satisfaction, surveys via email, phone, analytics to help you along the way. And then, of course, things like lead generation and lead conversion. You can have all the great research in the world that tells you what programs that you need to be running, but if you're not reaching students via the right communication channels at the right time with the right cadence and the right content, you're going to be you're never going to go anywhere. It's never going to get off the ground, right? So one of the ways that RNL goes about reaching and engaging prospective adult learners, helping with lead generation and lead conversion, is working with Platform Q Education to develop the Conduit Platform and integrate the Conduit Platform into those enrollment plans. One of the main reasons why is that RNL understands and most their partners understand that about 80% of web traffic by the end of 2020 is going to be video streaming. 9 out of 10 students watch videos from colleges, and ultimately a bad experience with you online, whether it's on your .edu website, a college help site, a video they're engaging with you on, is going to have students kind of cut you off of their list, even if it is a great program and a great match for you, or for them rather. It makes it so that they have a more troublesome time throughout that process. And the other piece to think about from a software development perspective and a strategic use of that software is, students are consumers. They prefer live chat on a website over things like picking up the phone and making a phone call, sending an email and waiting, 2 days for a response or 3 days for a response. So live chat is an element that needs to be part, especially when we're talking about graduate and adult learners who might be reviewing your website during business hours. They're at their desk. Maybe they don't want to pick up the phone and give you a call about the academic programs because they're working, but a live chat element would allow them to kind of gather that information and talk to somebody without taking official time away from their day. So just, again, thinking about that from a strategic perspective. So when we talk to RNL and we work with them on developing these plans, we say, how do we align omni-channel engagement, webcasting, streaming, live chat, legacy communications, email, texting, phone, etc., with overarching strategic enrollment plans with the intent of boosting conversion and yield, right? So, and when we look at it, what the numbers that we've seen from a conversion perspective, 35% application boost in application generation, more importantly, a 25% boost in application completion, and then even more importantly than that, about a 10% boost in inquiry through enrollment yield. So what we're talking about is when we align things like webcasting, streaming, and chat with traditional enrollment plans, we see more applications that are completed, and most importantly, more applicants who end up enrolling at the institution. So, the reality though is that, on the other side of that is doing these things are not easy, right? There's things like staff turnover. There's lack of integration in reporting. Your webcasting tool might be different than your streaming tool, which is different than your chat tool. You can record a webinar on a WebEx like we did with the original webinar, and then have that recording not available to you because it's lost in the ether of the internet. So having a platform that when you have your presentation completed, it's immediately endured, immediately available in an institutionally branded experience is going to go a lot further, but who builds those platforms themselves? It's not the easiest piece of the process, right? So when we talk about Conduit and when we talk about RNL's online engagement programming, what we're talking about is an integrated engagement platform that's aligned with strategy and service. So it's not just building, or it's not just hosting a webinar. 90% of the outcomes of a good webinar are what happens before that webinar and what happens after that webinar, right? It's the pre-event promotion, it's the content production, it's then during it, it's the monitoring for quality, audio, visual, making sure everything is well produced. And then on the back end, is that content immediately endured? Is it immediately available? You know, think about it from attending a webinar experience, right? You get an email from a Zoom or a WebEx or a GoToMeeting. These are meeting softwares that are kind of used for webinars. And the challenge is once that webinar is done, if you click to attend that webinar, let's say time zones are a thing, you click an hour late, whatever it is, you go to a page that says, sorry, this webinar is over, right? You have to wait for someone to download that recording, post it somewhere, send the link again. It's too arduous of a process, right? So what that piece does, and when we think about Conduit, we align that webcasting and streaming and live chat on a single unified platform that's also aligned with institutional branding and allows for various uses of video content. There's live webcasting, which is great, but your faculty members are not necessarily available 24 hours a day to present to future business students or for future enrollees in the online MBA program, right? You want that voice behind it, but they're not available at 6 o'clock at night when a lot of people might be logging in, or, online learners, maybe 2 o'clock in the morning. It doesn't matter, right? So in that context, you can do things like SimuLive. You record a presentation live once and then play it at scheduled times throughout the year, or you make that content available on demand. Kind of think about that Netflix experience for the college search. The other piece to this is you can also simulcast this content to social media, right? So one thing we know about adult learners, graduate prospects, online students is they're mobile, they're distracted, they're on multiple platforms throughout the day. How can they seamlessly go from a desktop-based experience to a tablet-based experience to a mobile phone-based experience to watching that content on Facebook, watching that content on YouTube, watching that content on Twitter? Conduit allows you to reach and engage students on all of these platforms. So when we think about lead generation, being able to broadcast some of that content to the public social media web, right? And then have students then click to further engage and connect with you on your platform. Now you're providing that opportunity for students to really understand you and your programs, and also make it so your staff isn't working 24 hours a day presenting webinar content, right? I think about when I was an admissions counselor at a regional private school in New England. We had a webinar schedule each spring to help with some of our yield efforts, right? And I gave the same webinar 7 weeks in a row, every Thursday at 6 o'clock, because that's what we decided to do as part of our schedule. We saw great results by having that content, but I can guarantee that my seventh time presenting it was not as good as my first time, right? Because as a presenter, you can kind of get fatigue on the content. And the reality is especially with graduate programs, when we think about multiple intake cycles throughout the year, you can have 5 to 6 weeks between intake cycles for an online program. The challenge is now what you're talking about is having a different, or challenge that we solve for really is having the audience change, but the content stay mostly the same, right? So you don't have to have the same rock star presenter counselor on your team giving the same presentation over and over again. You record them doing it once, broadcast it to social for lead gen purposes. The shelf life of content on YouTube is about a month, right? So that gives you that month, that length of time for that content on the social sphere, but then also re-leveraging that content for multiple intake cycles. Because again, the content doesn't change, the audience changes for each of those cycles. So it gives you that opportunity to re-leverage that content. The other piece of when we talk about Conduit as a integrated part of an overarching recruitment plan, one of the reasons why people love working with companies like RNL is you don't have necessarily the time to manage every aspect of the campaign. You want to maintain kind of two ends of it. You want to stay at the strategic level, and then you also want to have your team free to work directly with students. That's what they do best, right? Is communicating and working with students through the process. So one of the pieces of Conduit is the managed services element of, we're going to help with aligning the strategy with your overall plans. And what we're going to do is help with the marketing of that content to drive greater engagement via live and on-demand content. We see about a 50% increase in attendance through the outreach that we schedule versus when institutions work on it alone, right? And so what that looks like and feels like is, step one is we develop a pretty solid invitation cadence for pre-event and post-event outreach. So if it's a live event or a simu-live event, as an example, we would send about a save the date about a week before with a calendar hold or the link to the platform embedded into that email. On the day of, for priority prospects, we would send a day of reminder that's a watch live. That link goes directly to the platform. There's no additional registration. There's no additional downloads. There's no Zoom plugin or WebEx plugin. It goes right to your institutional platform. But all the reporting on the back end is tied to that individual student's record. So that personalized URL and make sure that anything that student does on your platform is tracked and reported back to your team. And then finally, after a live event or a semi-live event, we might add on an on-demand promotion with a scheduled live chat. So kind of engaging students with that personal connection with a chat, but not asking the presenter to be available for multiple presentations over and over again. So those links drive directly to content. And again, we say, on any platform, any device, via desktop, mobile, and tablet, from an engagement perspective. So no matter what a student is doing or how they're engaging with the content, they are able to consume that content on the device that works for them and the experience that works for them. But all of the engagement and all of the tracking is associated with that individual student's record. So, most importantly, out of all of this, on the back end, all of their engagement data is then reportable back to you. We can set up direct SFTP delivery to Slate, TargetX, any CRM that you might be working with. Those reports are also available within your Conduit dashboard, so you can send summaries to your team of that content without having to, build out multiple reports in your CRM throughout that process. So again, when we think about to kind of reinforce that point, when we talk about content consumption, what I've said before, 8 out of 10, 80% of internet traffic will be video consumption by the end of 2020. 9 out of 10 prospective students watch videos from colleges. A strong webcasting plan that combines that live TV viewing experience with the simu-live viewing experience on demand. Think about consuming content live, streaming, or DVR. When you think about watching, reruns of The Office or whatnot, you can watch clips on YouTube. You can watch full episodes on Netflix. You can buy them on DVD. They're available on different formats and platforms because their students are going and your consumers are going to go about consuming that content in a variety of different ways. So when we think about building out a immediately available and repeatable adult learner engagement sequence, what we see here is the opportunity to kind of have the starting point of out of the box of a 4 to 5 event sequence that combines that live plus on demand plus DVR type experience. Use it once or record it once and use it for each intake cycle throughout the year. Things like a program spotlight to start with that lead generation, demand generation type of content. Then, when you think of and lead conversion. And then when you think about financing and ROI, that's another area that helps students to understand the value of the investment in their graduate program, their online program. Then you get to the phase of enrolling where you want to have content that helps with getting those interested students to finish the process and actually enroll, right? So things like faculty panels, student panels, successful alumni panels, these are all things that are super helpful because things like alumni panels, you can even use that for alumni engagement, right? You ask successful alumni to share their stories. Now you're asking them to get involved beyond just asking for contributions, right? But the idea here is now you're producing content that the students who are going through the process are going to value to understand what they're going to get for their investment beyond just how to pay their bill, right? Then the final piece is, towards the end of a cycle, having pre-recorded content that kind of develops that Netflix type experience of, pre-enrollment overviews, how to register for courses in 5 minutes or less, how to pay your bill in 5 minutes or less, academic advising in 5 minutes or less. These are all things that you can create to help students with getting from finishing their application, sending their credentials, being admitted, and actually choosing to enroll at the institution, and then even more importantly, actually starting their program, right? So these are things that you can think about when building all that, building those out. And from a timing perspective, this is achievable within 2 weeks or less. So when you work with the Conduit team aligned with your RNL programs, we can go from strategic planning to event execution in under 2 weeks, depending on how quickly we can get all your creative and collateral and approvals in place, right? So we start with goal assessment and annual planning. In parallel, we'll develop your platform, build out that institutionally branded experience, design it, implement it, get approvals, and then comes the managed services element. So every time you develop a webcast, you have live support on the back end, you have live event production, event marketing, and promotion are all built into into these plans. And then on the final piece is that data analytics, quarterly evaluation of performance, tweaking to the plan depending on what needs are, and then we continue to go from there. So the final piece here that I want to get through is some examples of success, right? So, I mentioned earlier that there are a number of institutions who have already leveraged the Conduit platform to boost conversion and boost yield. So when we think about success, it's all in the numbers, right? So when we think about schools like University of Missouri, Kansas City, they went it took them about 3 weeks from sign on to first event. Their first event was a live chat where they addressed a list that they had acquired earlier in the process, hosted it on their website, and 100% of the students who engaged with their chat content enrolled for their past intake cycle. On top of this, students who participate in webcasts, which are a little bit more of a broader content strategy, 80% of those students who participated in a webcast enrolled for this past intake cycle. So this really is a high yield, low effort type of a work for institutions. Even schools like Babson, who are based in the Boston area, are consistently looking for ways to get in front of the right eyeballs. So they hosted about 7 specialized webcasts in less than a 3-month period of time. They had already, before switching to the Conduit platform, they were already scheduling out webinars on another platform, and they decided that what they were going to do is take those registrations that were on the other platforms and direct them to the content on the Conduit platform, which led to about a 90% show rate of students engaging with that content, either live or on demand. The other piece that they saw some efficiencies in their work is they've been hosting dedicated presentations for the MBA program on a monthly basis, and there was the same presenter giving the same content. So the opportunity is, again, to record that presentation once and make it a dedicated webcast on a monthly basis, and maybe align a chat with that content to answer some live Q&A. But now what they're not doing is spending that time, an hour each month, presenting that content live, but they're replenishing that content. So they're not wearing out their presenter, right? So these are just a couple of quick examples. I invite you to browse around the platform. We have multiple pages with some conference presentations we've been at, some overviews of features and functions, et cetera. You can also click the link that's below to set up a demo with our team. We encourage you to set up that time, because again, this is the time when we think about the calendar year, when people start thinking about 2020 plans. What are they going to do to improve their educational situation, their job situation, and having a presence and being available heading into that is something that's going to be really impactful when we think about engaging with our prospects. So with that, the last thing I'll leave you with is an invitation to connect in New Orleans, December 3rd through the 4th. RNL has a discount code that for people who view this content. So if you go to the Ruffalo Noel Levitt's website and you can register for their Strategic Enrollment Planning Executive Forum, this is a great opportunity to get a high level of a lot of great content and understand kind of insights and trends in the industry. And our team will be there to discuss the benefits and use of the Conduit platform as well. So hopefully we see you in December, if not before. Thank you so much again. Appreciate your time, and have a great rest of your day.